I was sitting in my corner office, the kind of place with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Pacific that still takes my breath away. The late afternoon light poured in, painting my desk gold. My silk blouse clung to my skin. California summers have a way of ignoring the air conditioning. I was reviewing the last page of a property sale agreement. One neat signature, and the deal would be final. The sound of my pen scratching across the paper was strangely satisfying, like the soft click of a lock finally opening. My phone buzzed. "Haley?" My sister's voice came through in a frantic rush. "Tell me this isn't true. Mom says you sold the land under my house." Her voice cracked, and for a moment, I closed my eyes. I could almost smell the salt in the air from her beach house in Laguna, hear the sound of waves rolling in. I'd been there once as a guest, on property that was supposed to be mine. I let her words hang in the air, my thumb resting lightly on the edge of my desk. Outside, the ocean shimmered like liquid silver. Inside, my chest felt steady. Years ago, I'd have been shaking with anger. Today, there was only calm, because the truth was simple. I had sold it, and I'd done it for a reason. I was 23 the day my world tilted sideways. It was a Sunday afternoon at my parents' house in Santa Barbara. Mom was in the kitchen, humming along to an old Fleetwood Mac record, while Dad and my older sister, Jessica, were on the back patio with a bottle of wine. I'd been called over for what Mom called a family update. The moment I sat down, I knew something was off. Mom's smile was tight, like she was holding her breath. Dad cleared his throat. "Haley," he began, "we've decided to use your inheritance to help Jessica with a down payment on her new beach house." I blinked. My inheritance? From Grandma Evelyn. Dad nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You're still young. You've got time to build your own life. Jess needs this now. She's starting a family soon." Jess didn't even meet my eyes. She just swirled her wine and said, "It's not like you were doing anything with it." The words hit me harder than I expected. My chest burned, and my hands trembled under the table. Grandma Evelyn's voice echoed in my mind, her warm laugh, the afternoons we'd spent baking together, the day she pressed a tiny brass key into my hand and said, "One day, you'll have your own door to open, and no one will be able to lock it." I looked at my parents, searching for any sign of fairness, but found only resolve. This wasn't a discussion. The decision had already been made. I tried to speak, but my throat closed up. When I finally managed, my voice cracked. It was mine. She wanted me to have it. Mom's eyes softened for a second, but Dad's jaw tightened. "It's for the family, Haley. Don't be selfish." Selfish. That word clung to me like a curse. I pushed back my chair, the legs scraping against the tile. The brass key in my pocket felt heavier than ever. "Fine," I said, my voice steadier now. "But remember this moment." They didn't understand what I meant. I wasn't sure I did either. I just knew I couldn't stay. That night, I packed 2 suitcases, slipped the brass key onto a chain around my neck, and walked out of the house I'd grown up in. I didn't have a plan, but I had something better, the sharp, unshakable knowledge that I would never let them decide my worth again. Leaving Santa Barbara felt like stepping off a cliff with no parachute. I ended up in a 1-bedroom apartment in Long Beach, a creaky old building with peeling paint and neighbors who argued through the walls. My kitchen was a hot plate and a mini fridge. The brass key hung around my neck every day, its weight reminding me I still had something of my own, even if I didn't know what door it belonged to yet. The first job I found was answering phones at a property management office. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the rent and gave me a front-row seat to how the real estate world worked. I listened to every conversation my boss, Linda Matthews, had with clients, absorbing the jargon, the strategies, the way she handled people like she owned the room. Linda was the kind of woman who wore sharp navy suits and red lipstick that didn't smudge no matter how much coffee she drank. One night, when I stayed late to reorganize her filing system, she stopped at my desk. "You ever think about getting your real estate license, Haley?" I laughed. "I can barely afford rent, let alone classes." She just smirked. "Figured out. You're sharper than most agents I know." That stuck with me. I found a cheap online program and studied every spare second, on lunch breaks, late at night, even on the bus ride home. I failed the exam once, passed it the second time. Linda hired me as an assistant agent, and I started hustling, showing apartments, knocking on doors, convincing skeptical owners to give me a shot. The first time I closed a deal, I celebrated with a grocery store cupcake and a bottle of $6 wine. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I started buying small fixer-uppers with scraped-together savings and flipping them. The first one nearly bankrupted me. The plumbing was a nightmare, and I painted the living room myself at 2 a.m., crying from exhaustion. But when it sold, the profit was enough to make me believe this could work. From there, I moved fast. Duplexes in rough neighborhoods. Tiny condos near universities. I learned how to spot value where no one else bothered to look. And I learned something else: silence was power. I didn't post about my deals on social media. My parents thought I was still working as a secretary. Jess assumed I was barely getting by and never asked questions. I let them keep their assumptions. The less they knew, the better. 5 years in, I owned 12 properties and had just closed on a commercial building in Laguna Beach. When I realized the plot of land directly under Jess's beachfront house was up for sale, thanks to a foreclosure mess, I didn't hesitate. I bought it quietly through a holding company. Standing on that sand the first time as the legal owner, I felt the brass key in my hand. No one else knew what it meant. Not yet. But I did. And one day they would too. It was a Saturday morning when they showed up unannounced. I'd just finished a meeting in my home office, a room bathed in sunlight with walls lined in abstract coastal paintings I'd collected over the years. My desk was a polished walnut slab with a leather inlay, and the Pacific stretched out beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows like an endless sheet of blue glass. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Jess, Mom, and Dad standing on my front porch. Jess was wearing oversized sunglasses and that impatient tilt of her chin I knew too well. Mom's eyes were red. She'd been crying. Dad's mouth was set in a grim line. "We need to talk," Jess said, pushing past me like she owned the place. They trailed into the living room. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the waves below. Jess stopped mid-stride, her gaze catching on the framed property deeds arranged on the wall beside my bookshelf. My name, in elegant black print, was stamped across each one. "Is this all yours?" she asked. I took my time answering, crossing to the bar cart and pouring myself a glass of water. Every single one. Dad glanced around. The curated art, the handmade rugs, the antique brass key framed in a shadow box above the mantel. "When did you get all this?" I smiled faintly. "Over the years. While you assumed I was barely getting by." Jess's composure cracked. "You bought the land under my beach house. Why?" I set my glass down and looked her in the eye. "Because it was mine to begin with. Grandma Evelyn left me that inheritance to build my life. Instead, you got a beach house. I got nothing, except a lesson." Mom's voice trembled. "Haley, we thought." "No." I cut in gently but firmly. "You didn't think about me. You made a choice, and it cost me years of struggle. But it also taught me how to stand on my own, how to build something without handouts. And now, here we are." Jess's voice rose. "So what? You're going to evict me?" I leaned against the desk, crossing my arms. "No. I'm going to sell the land. The buyer will decide what happens next." Her face went pale. "You can't do that." "I can," I said softly. "And I have." Silence settled over the room. Dad's shoulders slumped, the weight of realization pressing down. Mom looked at the floor, her hands twisting together. Jess stood frozen, her confidence slipping like sand through her fingers. I let the quiet stretch, the sound of the waves filling the space between us. Then I spoke again, my voice calm, even. "This isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming what was mine, and making sure you understand I'm not the person you dismissed all those years ago." Jess shook her head, but her eyes were glassy. "You could have talked to me first." I met her gaze. "I tried talking once. You all made your decision without me. This time, I made mine without you." Mom finally looked up. Haley, we didn't realize how much we hurt you. I nodded slowly. I know. And maybe now you do. The air was heavy with things none of us had ever said out loud. Regret.
Pride. Shame.
But under it all, there was something else, a shift in the balance that had been tilted my whole life. For the first time, they saw me not as the youngest daughter, not as the one who would figure it out eventually, but as a woman who had built her own empire, brick by brick. And I wasn't done yet. We sat in the living room for a long moment, the tension thick enough to taste. Outside, gulls called over the sound of the surf, their cries sharp and cutting. Finally, I broke the silence. I'm not here to burn bridges, but I'm also not here to pretend the past didn't happen. So here's how this is going to work. Jess crossed her arms, still defensive. You think you can just make rules for us now? I didn't flinch.
No.
I know I can. Because I'm the one holding the ground your house sits on. I'm giving you options, something you never gave me. Her eyes narrowed. What options? I turned to my parents first. You've spent my whole life enabling favoritism. Jess got the house, the help, the safety net. I got told to figure it out. That ends here. If you want to have a relationship with me, you need to treat us equally. That means transparency, no backroom decisions, no choosing sides. And if you can't do that, I'm fine keeping our contact polite but distant. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Dad stared at the carpet, his jaw tight. Then I faced Jess. You have two choices. One, you work out a deal with the new buyer after I close the sale. That might mean renting, it might mean leaving. Or two, you buy the land from me, at market value. Not $1 less. And you pay for it yourself, no parental bailout. Jess scoffed. That's impossible. I don't have that kind of money. I shrugged lightly. Then you'd better figure it out. I did. She looked like she wanted to argue, but her lips pressed together. The silence between us was more telling than any words. I softened my voice, not out of pity, but out of truth. Jess, this isn't about punishing you. It's about accountability. I built everything I have from nothing. And I'm not ashamed to say I'm proud of that. You can build something too if you stop expecting everything to be handed to you. Her shoulders slumped, the fight draining from her posture. I took a breath. And one more thing. All of you, if you want me in your life, you're going to have to earn my trust back. That means showing up, not just when you need something, but when it's inconvenient. It means asking about my life without assuming you know the answers. It means respecting my boundaries. Mom nodded slowly, her hands clasped tight. Dad's voice was low when he finally spoke. You've made your point, Haley. I gave a small smile. It's not just a point. It's the new standard. And it's not negotiable. We didn't hug when they left. There were no tearful reconciliations, no sudden apologies that made everything better. But as I watched them walk down my driveway toward their car, I felt a shift, a space opening for something healthier, even if it took time. The balance had changed. And this time, I was the one setting the terms. 2 months later, the sale went through. The land beneath Jess's beach house officially belonged to someone else, a developer with big plans for the property. I didn't gloat. There was nothing left to prove. In the weeks that followed, small changes began to appear. Mom started calling just to say hello, her voice hesitant but warmer. Dad sent me articles about real estate trends, clumsy attempts at conversation, but conversation nonetheless. Even Jess surprised me. She texted one evening, looking at jobs. Any advice? I didn't give her a lecture. I just sent back. Start anywhere. Then keep going. Meanwhile, my own life kept moving forward. I acquired 2 more properties, started mentoring a young woman named Kelsey, who reminded me of myself at 23, hungry to learn, scared to fail. Passing on what Linda had once given me felt like closing a circle. One afternoon, while tidying my office, I noticed the brass key framed on my wall. I took it down, feeling the cool metal in my palm. For years, it had been a symbol of a door I hadn't found yet. Now I realized I'd built that door myself, and the house and the land it stood on. I thought about Grandma Evelyn. She would have laughed at how it all turned out, Maybe even poured me a glass of champagne and told me not to waste it on bitterness. She always believed in strength, but never without grace. So, I made a choice. I invited my parents and Jess to dinner, not to reopen wounds, but to test if the bridge could be rebuilt. We met at a quiet oceanfront restaurant. Conversation was awkward at first, but it didn't collapse. We talked about the food, the waves, the little details that don't change no matter how much people do. As we left, Jess lingered by my side. "I'm working on it," she said quietly. "I know I've got a lot to fix." I nodded. "We all do. Just keep building." When I got home, I hung the brass key back in its frame. It wasn't just a reminder anymore, it was a trophy. Proof that I could lose everything and still come back stronger. They once thought they could keep me out by giving my inheritance away. But I'd learned the truth. Walls can be torn down, locks can be picked, and sometimes you just buy the ground they stand on.